Hello, Professor Reynolds and anyone else that may be viewing this video. This is video presentation number 2. I decided to do James Madison, born in 1751, himself and Thomas Jefferson, kind of known as the fathers of the Constitution, if you will. Very important, as Thomas Jefferson was the 3rd president of the United States. James Madison was the 4th. Madison, what he kind of did was he kind of wrote the Constitution. He was the guy that went around, looked at a lot of different governments in a lot of different countries, took a lot of notes. During the Constitutional Convention, he was always the one taking notes over the debates, what the problems were, what he maybe could do to fix that, and to kind of implement that into his plan. Madison, he believed that the United States, they needed to have a strong federal government. And a lot of people did back then, but a lot of people didn't as well, hence the Constitutional Convention. After they claimed independence from Great Britain, the colonies were just kind of in a standstill. They didn't really know where to go, so they started off with the Articles of Confederation. Didn't work out the best. States still had a lot of power, so James Madison, younger guy when the Constitutional Convention was going on, like I said, he was born in 51. He had a very big role in that. He kind of got into politics early, and decided that he was going to be a part of the Continental Congress. He ran for the representative in Virginia, which the Articles of Confederation did call for representation. But as we would learn later, the Constitution kind of laid out a different scenario for representation. It used to be, it was based off of wealth and the population of the state, whereas the Constitution would kind of put it into an even keel where the House of Representatives would be based on the population of the colony or of the state. And the senators, each state, each colony would each have 2 senators represent them. So that was very important, something that James Madison did actually write down, work out with Thomas Jefferson, and actually put into the Constitution when it was signed. The key thing I really want to touch on is James Madison's involvement in the Constitution and what he did. He was a very important role, him and Thomas Jefferson. I know Jefferson was kind of the one who wrote it down and really did it, but without James Madison, without Thomas Jefferson, without the big names there to assist in writing the Constitution, then a lot of ideas wouldn't have been put into place. Like I said, Madison believed that the United States needed a strong federal government. So what he brought to the table was the Virginia Plan. Like I said, he was a senator in Virginia, so he was their representative to go to the Constitutional Convention. And the Virginia Plan kind of laid out a variety of things, but the main thing that he brought to the table was the checks and balances of the government. People really feared that having too strong of a federal government and having too strong of one branch would really cause issues in the new country. So Madison brought together the Virginia Plan. It laid out the House of Representatives, how that would be based, and we still use that today. The House of Representatives is based off of population, and California is going to have the most. They have the most people. Florida's right in there. Texas as well. And Michigan's kind of right there in the middle. They send quite a few, but not as nearly as many as Texas, California, and Florida. So, and then the senators. The senators, same thing today, and same thing as they kind of found in the Constitution. 2 people from each state. And that's just kind of how it went, and Madison proposed that. And then he also proposed, with the checks and balances, that there was going to be an executive branch, which we have today, a legislative branch, and also a judicial branch, which is still relevant. In the Constitution today, the Constitution hasn't really changed much, but besides amendments and so forth. So Madison put that plan forward at the Constitutional Convention, which the convention lasted about 4 months, from May of 1787 to September of 1787 until it was finally ratified. And, Madison was a big proponent in putting that Virginia plan in. And, you had Patterson with the New Jersey plan as well. And they kind of molded the two plans together, taking a lot of what Madison said. And that's why he was such a key role in the new government. Madison, he also elected the idea that governors and judges had more power to help and manage the state legislatures. It was a big deal. The states had a lot of power. They were running their own currencies in different colonies. They were doing their own government. They were running their own law. So when you went to a different colony, it wasn't the same, and punishments could be different in different states. And Madison wanted to put a halt to that and make sure that everybody was under the federal government power, in the sense that they would help the state legislators set their rules and their laws and whatnot, but it was still to be a state-by-state basis, and differences weren't too large that the federal government couldn't overcome those. Virginia plan, huge step in the right direction, and like I said, it ended up being the base of how the Constitution would be formed. I do have a few notes. Like I said, James Madison was a big note taker. He really believed in the importance of taking notes at the debates, so he could go back and reread those, and kind of elaborate on what he had just heard for the day, kind of address concerns when he went back the next day for the Constitutional Convention and whatnot. So this is from James Madison's notes. This was early in the convention. This would have been around June, right after they got started, and they were still trying to work things out. The great difficulty lies in the affair of representation, and if this could be adjusted, all others would be surmountable. It was admitted by both the gentlemen from New Jersey that it would not be just to allow Virga, which has 16 times as large as Delaware, an equal vote only. Their language was that it would not be safe for Delaware to allow Virginia 16 times as many votes. The expedient proposed by them was that all the states should be thrown into one mass and new partition be made into 13 equal parts, based on the colonies and how they would eventually be set up. Would such a scheme be practicable? The dissimilarities existing in the rules of property as well as in the manners, habits, and prejudices of different states amounted to a prohibition of the attempt. Very important. They kind of laid the groundwork for the 13 colonies. The Constitution needed to be ratified by 9 of the 13 colonies for the United States to come into effect. James Madison was a big proponent of this, believed in representation, and the biggest thing that was to be decided by Madison, Patterson, who wrote the New Jersey plan, was really how trade was going to be affected, and also how representation was going to deem to be important for the colonies. And so Madison, he really saw that representation was very, very important. It was very important to the Federalists. It was very important to the Anti-Federalists to an extent, because they were also a proponent of not having the big government to oversee them as much. The Federalists and Anti-Federalists were born during this time, and James Madison was a Federalist. He believed in the strong central government, whereas the Anti-Federalists were they were against the Constitution, felt that the Constitution gave way too much power to the central government, and so that's why the Constitutional Convention really dragged on so long. And Madison, he was, I think the coolest thing I learned about Madison is he was just resilient. And during the 5 months that the Constitutional Convention was taking place, he took notes every single day. He wrote 85 essays for a paper that was published during that time called The Federalists. He was just such a believer in his values and in the way he believed government should be run that he wanted everybody to hear about it. And I think I can really admire that. I think people really admired that back then. They wanted someone that was going to tell them the truth, and they wanted someone to lead their thoughts. And James Madison was that guy. Robert Yates was also a big note taker. I believe he was a representative from Pennsylvania, or what now today would be Pennsylvania, of the colonies. And he really found the importance of what Madison was saying because he was an anti-federalist. So as an anti-federalist, he could have skewed his notes. He could have, really went out against James Madison. And I think that's a big problem we have today with Democrats and Republicans. There's no middle ground. And it's kind of where I am. I'm in the middle ground. And I'm not as far right as I could be, and I'm not as far left as I could be. So the Federalists and Anti-Federalists, their main concern was government. And now there's just too many issues that we have split decisions on. So anyways, Robert Yates, he had some notes as well. I'm going to read from his notes. This was kind of James Madison speaking against the New Jersey Plan, even though, in the end they ended up combining the Virginia Plan, the New Jersey Plan, more of the Virginia Plan, but there was some good stuff in the New Jersey Plan too that they added in. So here's the notes Robert Yates took of James Madison speaking at the Constitutional Convention. The rights of individuals are infringed by many of the state laws, such as issuing paper money and instituting a mode to discharge debts differing from the form of the contract. Has the Jersey Plan any checks to prevent this mischief? Does it in any instance secure internal tranquility? Right and force in a system like this are synonymous terms. When force is employed to support the system and men obtain military habits, is there no danger they may turn their arms against their employers? Will the Jersey Plan prevent foreign influence? Did not Persia and Macedon distract the councils of Greece by acts of corruption? It is not Jersey and Holland at this day subject to same distractions. Will not the plan be brothersome to the smaller states, and if they have an equal representation? But how is military coercion to enforce government? True, a smaller state may be brought to obedience or crushed, but what if one of the larger states should prove disobedient? Are you sure you can by force effect a submission? Suppose we cannot agree on any plan. What will be the condition of the smaller states? Will Delaware and Jersey be safe against Pennsylvania, or Rhode Island against Massachusetts? And how will the smaller states be situated in case of partial confederacies? Will they not be obliged to make large concessions to the greater states? The point of representation is the great point of difference, in which the greater states cannot give up. And although there was an equalization of states, state distinctions would still exist. But this is totally impractical. And what would be the effect of the Jersey Plan if 10 or 12 new states were added? So Madison speaking on this and the Jersey Plan during the Constitutional Convention was a pretty big deal because the Jersey Plan really didn't lay out representation how it should. James Madison also, even though being from Virginia, a big plantation state, one that had much wealth, that had much power, a lot of people living there too as well with the slave population and, being able to produce what they could produce, James Madison still fought for those smaller states. He inherently believed that everybody should have their religious freedoms, of speech and religion and everything in between. And that's what I really admired about the guy and enjoyed learning about him. And that's how he prevailed during the Constitutional Convention. he was able to put works into the Federalists, get the other colonies to back him, and the Constitution, in September of 1787 was signed into effect, and the United States was officially born. I think a huge reason for Madison's success was his research and what other countries were doing around the world. And by putting his values in front of him. For 5 long months, Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, Madison spent all of his time preaching on what he felt was right for all of the colonies, not just his colony. So it was just a big deal. James Madison, a guy that today in politics, I wish that we could kind of look back on what he stood for, what he really meant to the founding of this country, and kind of go from there. So James Madison, he ended up dying in 1836. Like I said, 4th president of the United States, was a fantastic president, fantastic person, helped founded this great country of ours, and we couldn't be more thankful for him. So thank you.